Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So we're gonna do Bell math video, our dear Raiden Shogun math video for 3 of the 5-star weapons, Skyward Spine, Primordial Jade Spear, as well as Staff of Homa. Now I've already done for the Engulfing Lightning, as well as Decatch. So in this video, if we do have time left, I will try to do a weapon comparison for these 3 5-star weapons. Otherwise, I'll just do a separate video just to talk about all 5 weapons in comparison. But for this video, let's focus on talking about whether or not the attack or ER sense is better, as well as whether the attack percent goblet or damage percent goblet is better for each of these weapons, as well as some of the other caveats or things to take note of for these weapons. Okay. First, we have Skyward Spine. I'm very sure everyone is thinking that Skyward Spine should be a decent 5-star weapon for Bell, since the subset is ER. I'll just do a quick introduction about Skyward Spine itself. It has the highest base attack, 674 at level 19. R1 and R5. R1 gives you a 8% crit rate and 12% attack speed buff. And your normal and charged attacks have on opponents have a 50% chance to trigger a 40% AoE effect, a vacuum effect, and R5 is 100% damage. So 40% damage and 100% damage, and it's a 50% trigger chance. Okay. Now, here's the thing about the Skyward Spine. I have the entire figures out already. So I'll just pause here slightly so that you guys can compare the figures if you want to. You can pause the video at any time to compare. Okay, now first let me start by saying that the 12% attack speed, I did not factor it in the math here, because there's actually no accurate way to correctly calculate the actual attack speed, how it improves the DPS without actual playtest, because the data on the number of attacks Bell can do per hit, I need that data. And we don't have that data per se, because whatever you see on lists, how should I put it, may not be 100% accurate for the purpose of the calculation. It's good for seeing how her animation works, but not in terms of like doing math on like the attack per, how long each attack takes. And not to mention, there's also something called hit lag. When you hit the mob, there's a hit lag, and that will interfere with your attack speed. If you want to understand what I'm trying to say, you can use Razor, use his burst. You'll notice that you attack a lot faster when you're not hitting something. That's what we call by hit lag, because when you hit something, it's not as fast as when you're not hitting anything, you're just swinging your sword or your claymore. So anyway, for attack speed, I'm not doing it in the math here. So in other words, whatever figures you see here, it should be improved or better than what you see, but not by a lot. At most, maybe by 1 or 2 hits, my guess is within the 7 seconds of her burst. But it's still damage, right? It's still additional damage. But I'm not factoring it here. I didn't want to make any assumptions. Okay. Now, standard stuff. I permutate always with 3 ER targets, and let me just freeze the screen here so that you guys can see what are the artifact main stats that are being used. Okay, so first permutation obviously is 300% ER target. Okay, first pair we have 300% ER target, attack goblet versus damage goblet. Second pair we have 215 ER, just 250 ER alone, so that we can see how the damage difference is like. It uses the ER sense as well as the attack goblet. Now when it comes to 200% ER, 200% ER we do have a pair here, and it's attack versus damage goblet. And sense is actually attack sense, because you don't need an ER sense when you are going for 200 ER. Not when your weapon has a... no, I shouldn't put it that way. Not when you already have quite a number of ER sources for Bell. If you see here, yes. So you have weapon substack giving 36.8, 2-piece emblem giving 20, Ascension substack giving 32, so it's already a lot. So you definitely do not need ER sense if you're trying to target 200 ER. Okay, so these are the permutations. Also have one is the realistic permutation, but I'll talk more about that later. If you see my previous 2 videos on Bell Math, you know what I mean. Okay, now likewise with the catch, the previous summary for the catch, 200 gives the best DPS. It's the same case for Skyward Spine, because it allows you to get more crit rolls and attack sense. However, 200 may not be enough to give your burst 100% of the time. Although likely it should with a second Electro character, but we won't know until we see how her particle generation is like. Okay, so 200 is the target as well as a attack sense. Okay, 200 ER with attack sense. The only scenario you need more than 200% ER is if it's actually not enough to give you a 100% burst uptime. Meaning that once the burst cooldown is done, you are ready to cast her burst again. Okay, in terms of the energy. Okay, now let's go to the TLDR. Damage versus attack percent goblet. At 200% ER, if you have an attack percent goblet that's better, it will be better than damage. So this is pretty much the same conclusion as the catch, but the difference being that the damage goblet actually does better when you have fully maxed out supports and equally well rolled. It does slightly better than the catch. The percentage boost here is bigger. The catch is about 4%, but for the Skyward Spine, it's about 5.6%. Okay, and it's also because the base attack is higher. So you do get more attack, and when you have more attack, damage goblet will be better than the attack percent goblet. So that is where this comes in. Now on the whole, because the difference is still quite small, a very good or very well rolled attack percent goblet is still better than a damage one. But equally well rolled plus fully maxed out support, damage goblet is better. So it really depends on your artifact farming luck. Okay, so that's for, we covered sense, we covered ER target, we covered damage versus attack percent goblet. How about at 300% ER? If you want to go 300% ER, attack percent goblet is better. It's around 9% better. So you may be wondering, why would I want to go 300% ER when when Koinzell already says 200 is the best DPS? Because maybe you don't have the burst out time yet, right? Or other scenario is you want your Belle to be able to do better, fulfill her battery function, because how much she can recharge, how much energy she can recharge for her team depends on her own ER. Right. Now for the final point for Skyward Spine. So these are all based on almost perfect artifact rolls. If you see here, it's really almost perfect. You can only have one that goes wrong or two that goes wrong on 300% ER. On 200% ER attack sense, this is the one that I recommended. You only can afford 3 rolls to go wrong, which means that it's almost perfect, really. So, in a realistic permutation, where you have 9 artifacts going wrong, meaning only slightly more than half of your artifacts go to the right place, which is a lot more realistic, this is the type of damage that we'll be looking at. Okay, this is the type of damage you'll be looking at. At level 9, C0R1, you get a 50k on her burst and a 52k on her burst stance at normal attacks, rather the M41C combo, which is 4 normal attacks followed by 1 charge attack, because that's the most optimal combo in terms of speed of the animation as well as making good use of her resolve stats. So you can do 100k damage in the first 1 second. Let's say we would 1 second for the cast animation time, the burst initial hit, plus 3 seconds of the normal attacks in her burst stance. That's about 100k damage. So for Skyward Spine, dealing 100k damage, not too bad, I guess. Okay, the video is already 9 minutes, so I think I'll talk about the 3 weapons. I will not talk about weapon comparison or overview of it per se, but I know that there was a comment asking me about Skyward Spine versus the catch, so I want to just quickly show the catch figure. Okay, so this is the catch figure. With a realistic artifact, we are talking about this amount. So Skyward Spine is only slightly better. Only slightly better. Okay, it's only better in this area, in the burst stance. But again, remember that I have not factored in attack speed. So if you factor in attack speed, this might be much better. Or rather, I shouldn't say much better, but it will be better than what you see now in terms of the comparison. It's hard for me to do assumptions. I really want to refrain from doing assumptions on like how many additional hits we'll get, whether it's 1 hit or 2 hits or 3 hits. But 1 hit itself would give you a pretty substantial boost over the catch, I think. Because although the absolute figure is small, but you look at percentage itself, I think Skyward Spine can do better damage during her M4 1C in this mode. Okay, so that's for Skyward Spine. In the realistic setup, rather than dealing 64k, you can do about 50k. Rather than dealing 66k, you can do about 52k. So still pretty good. Still pretty good. Just that, I mean, if you want to compare like a 5-star weapon versus a full F2P weapon, the catch, you want the 5-star weapon to be much better. Correct? It's not wrong to think that. It's just that, let me put it this way. The catch is a weapon that's really designed for Bell, whereas Skyward Spine wasn't. And Skyward Spine is pretty old weapon. It was there since the launch, so almost a year now. But don't worry about that because you have Engulfing, which is super strong versus the catch. So yeah, up to you guys to decide whether or not to use Skyward Spine or the catch. But when I do my weapon comparison video, I will also bring in other factors to consider between the Skyward Spine and the catch. So look out for that video when it's out. I'll probably try to upload it in the next day or two. Right, now this is for R1 Skyward Spine. How about R5? So R5 itself, R5 versus R1. Basically you get easier artifact rolls since there's a higher CR. And when you get a higher CR from the R5 effect, which is 16 CR, it also means that you have higher crit potential. It means that you can use the rolls to get an even higher crit damage than what I've placed here, which is 60 and 160. Okay. Also, attack percent goblet does very slightly better on R5, since the attack percent goblet buffs the weapon proc effect, the Skyward weapon proc effect. So that's why now the attack percent goblet does very slightly better on R5 as compared to R1. So that's one point to know as well. Okay, now let's move on to the second weapon, Primordial Jade Wind Spear. Okay, Primordial Jade Wind Spear is here. So very nice crit rate, 22.1% crit rate, and the highest base attack as well, 674. The R1 and R5 effect, I have to say Primordial Jade Wind Spears, if I want to calculate the stacking, the accumulation of the stacks, etc., it is way too tedious. Basically, the tedium that we are talking about here is my formula from 1 or 1.5 lines goes to like 10 lines worth, because if I really want to do this calculation. So yeah, for the sake of my sanity, I don't think I want to go there. So for that, right, we'll just simply do a 0 stats versus a 7 stat, because you see here max is 7 stats, you get attack 3.2% times 7 at max stats, and while you get max stats, you get a damage boost of 12% as well, 12% as well. Okay. For R5, you get 6% attack per stack, and damage dealt is increased to 24%. So let me go. Okay, first off, let me just stop here so that you guys can see the figures. Oh right, I have not shown the R5. Sorry about that. So these are the R5 figures. I'm not going to show. This is how it looks like. Don't think I want to show the realistic figures. You can see how it looks like. You can pause it and decide whether or not it's worthwhile to use the R5 Skyward Spine if you already have one on Bell versus some other weapon choice. Okay, now back to Primordial Jade Wind Spear. These are the damage figures. You have the 0 stats as well as the max stats. Okay. So like I just mentioned, it's very difficult to calculate, so I'm just going to do a simple 0 versus 7 stats comparison here. But one quick side note is that you can only achieve max stats in Belle's by the time you hit the second hit of Belle's second M41C cycle, because in her 7 hits, you will see that 7 damage figures in one M41C cycle. However, 2 of them are like a double hit, and given that there's a 0.3 second cooldown on gaining stacks on the Primordial Jade Spear, I would think that in one M41C cycle you're only able to get 5 stacks, because there's 2 of the attacks are double hits. So when it comes to her second M41C cycle, then you are able to get your max stacks. Of course, this is assuming that you cast her burst at 0 stats, but I would think that that's the way to do it, because I don't think you want to be using physical attacks, hitting 7 times before using her burst. While yes, you do get a damage boost as well as the attack boost for her burst, but you waste a lot of DPS hitting with normal attacks instead of Electro when her entire kit is based on Electro. But yeah, I mean, if that's what you prefer, you do you. But I think the most optimal is really just to bite the bullet and just cast her burst at 0 stats and build it up, so that the overall flow in terms of team rotation is faster too. Yeah. Right, now let's talk about the standard ER targets. So again, 200% ER is the best. You can see from here. Let me just freeze the view so that's clearer. In terms of permutation, it's the exact same as what I just discussed or explained in the Skyward Spine section. Okay. So here you have 300% ER, attack, damage goblet, 250% ER, then 200% ER, attack, damage goblet, and attack sense instead of ER sense because it's 200% ER. You don't need the ER sense. Okay, so 200 gives you the best DPS, but again, like what I always say, right? We don't know whether 200% is enough for her burst uptime. Right. One thing to call out here is that for Primordial Jade Spear, 300 requires absolutely perfect artifact rolls, which means that it's really not practical at all, because you cannot have a single artifact roll or upgrade that goes wrong. I don't think anyone is that lucky, honestly speaking. You can farm for months and you won't be able to get such artifacts. So, if Belle requires 300% ER for 100% uptime, then Primordial Jade Spear will not be able to achieve 100% burst uptime realistically. So that's just one point to note. But I honestly don't think that you need 300% ER for the burst uptime. Although she does have 90 energy, highest energy requirement so far. Right now the highest in-game is 80. Once she releases, she will be the one with the highest energy cost. Okay, next, damage versus attack percent goblet. It's pretty much the same as the Skyward Spine. Attack percent a more well-ruled or a better well-ruled attack percent goblet will be better than a damage goblet. But if you are equally well-ruled between the two and with fully maxed out support like CC Sarah, EM Kazuha, damage goblet is going to be better. And how much better really depends on how your support characters are built like. But basically it ranges from 0.6 to 5.9% boost. So really up to you. And not really up to you, but like up to your artifact farming luck. Yeah. Right. 300% ER is only about 5 to 6% as compared to 9% on the Skyward Spine. 100% ER honestly is not a feasible target for Primordial Jade Spear. So let's talk about the artifacts, the realistic artifacts. These are how the realistic artifacts would look like. Okay. On the Primordial Jade Spear, at 0 stats, it's exactly the same as Skyward Spine. At max stats, however, it's about 58.9k, so that's not too bad. I mean, at least there is a more significant difference versus Skyward. Versus Skyward versus Catch. M41C. These are the two types of damage when you have stats and no stats. Now bear in mind all of these figures, the rows corresponds to C0, C1, C2, and then you have max stats C0, C1, C2. Okay. So as you get your talent level higher, obviously the damage goes up. And if you fully crown Bell at C0, this is the total damage that you'll be looking at. Max stats is 62.6, no stats at all is 54. If you notice, it feels kinda, how should I put it, not that great, right? Not that big of a boost over, say, the catch. But I'll talk more about that when it comes to the weapon comparison video. Likewise, this point will be on the weapon comparison video. Now on to R5 Primordial Jade Wind Spear. If you happen to have R5 Primordial Jade Wind Spear at max stats, you get more attack percent, thus damage percent. Goblet does very slightly better on R5 compared to R1. It's about 2% better, or 2% more compared to attack percent Goblet on R5. Okay, so that's for Primordial Jade Wind Spear. Next up we have Homa, Staff of Homa, or Staff of Homeless. Okay, so Staff of Homeless, right? Permutation here all is the same in terms of like the target is the main stat that we are doing. So let me just freeze the screen here, so there's a point of reference. One thing to note is that for Staff of Homa, because it gives so much crit damage on its weapon roll itself, 66.2%, you can actually aim for a higher crit damage target. And this is also one of the reasons why Homa, you'll see that Homa does better than PJWS as well as Skyward Spine. Not to mention that its effect, right? Also gives a pretty decent attack boost. Okay, so first off, before I go into all these, right, I just want to say that the calculations here did not assume any additional HP percentage from artifacts at all. The only additional HP percentage that we got is from the plus 20 flower, which is flat HP, and 20% HP from the Staff of Homa R1 and 40% from the Staff of Homa from R5. These are the only three factors used in the calculation. I am assuming 0 HP gain from artifacts, but realistically speaking, you know, if you fun this game enough, you know you'll always get a few. So in fact, I'm already discounting the damage that we are getting here. So 300, 250, 200 ER is still the best DPS. You'll see here 200% ER with attack sense. But one different thing, if you notice, are the figures here. These percentage figures here, and I'll talk about that later. So same thing, 200 give best DPS. We don't know yet whether or not it has 100% uptime. 300 requires almost perfect rolls. So like Primordial Jade Wind Spear, for the 300% ER, you're not able to achieve it realistically. If 300% ER is required for 100% burst uptime, it's not going to be achievable on Staff of Homa and Primordial Jade Wind Spear. Okay, now next up, so damage versus attack percent Goblet. This is where Staff of Homa is different from Primordial Jade Wind Spear as well as Skyward Spine, because at 200% ER, only a perfect attack percent Goblet can be better than an average damage Goblet. So i.e. in most scenarios, basically damage Goblet is better. And on top of that, when they are both equally well rolled between these two main stat, and then you have fully maxed out supports, damage Goblet does even better. The percentage damage difference even goes up to 8.2% highest. Okay, 8.2% is when you are using EM Kazuha without Freedom Zone, because Freedom Zone gives you attack percent buff. That's why it will lower the difference between attack versus damage. But if you are using a pure EM Kazuha with, say, Iron Sting, you are going to get a 8.2% difference. So basically, TLDR, for Staff of Homa, damage Goblet is actually better. For Skyward Spine and Primordial Jade Wind Spear, attack percent Goblet is better. for most scenarios anyway. And the sense, you want to use attack sense for all three and target 200% ER. Okay. 300% ER, the difference is even smaller than that of Primordial Jade Spear for Homa. It's only 1 to 4% better. But 300% ER itself is not a feasible target. Like I mentioned, it's just not possible. You need all your artifacts to roll attack percent, CR, CD, and ER. And then all the upgrades must go correctly. So, yeah, not possible. Okay, so realistic artifact view. Let's take a look at that. So realistic artifact wise, we will just go for 165% crit damage. It's actually higher than the other spears, or the other weapons, because the other weapons will only target about 150 crit damage. Again, this is because Staff of Homa gives us a very nice amount of crit damage, so that's why we can afford to have a higher crit damage ceiling. Okay, so 1665. So these are the damage figures that you can expect from Homa. You see right off the bat, it's actually pretty good. 56k versus 50k, 60k versus 58k and 52k. But I need to remind again that the 52k should be higher once we factor in attack speed, and that 58k is only during the second M41C cycle. After the second hit, then you will get that type of damage figure. Otherwise, before that, it's actually weaker. But it will not be weaker than 50k. At least for the M41C figures, sorry. This is for the burst initial hit. So I'm talking really about these figures here. Okay. So I hope this helps show you guys how the different weapons fare, and more importantly, what damage percent, whether you should go for damage percent goblet or attack percent goblet, whether you should go for ER sense or attack sense. The video is already 27 minutes, so I will do a separate video doing a full weapon comparison between the 5 weapons. I'll probably focus on comparing each weapon against the Catch and Engulfing Lightning, since those are the 2 new weapons in 2.1. And for this video, let me just end it off with a final TLDR. For Skyward Spine, Primordial Jade Spear, and Staff of Homa, I would recommend to go for attack sense and target a 200% ER. That's assuming 200% ER is enough for us to get 100% burst up ton on belt. Okay. Point number 2, attack percent goblet is the one to go for Primordial Jade Spear and Skyward Spine. Unless your damage goblet is absolutely perfect. I'm talking about, like, 40+% crit damage on one goblet, that type of perfect. Okay. Now, the second thing I want to talk about, the last one I want to talk about, the last TLDR, or rather the last point, is that for Staff of Homa, damage goblet is the one that's better, because Homa gives you enough attack such that the damage goblet will do better. Okay, so damage goblet for Homa. Yeah, so this is the TLDR for this video. Attack sense for all 3 weapons, 200% ER target. Attack goblet for Primordial Jade Spear, Skyward Spine, and damage goblet for Staff of Homa. Okay, I already provided a view on the figures. Oh, right, one more thing about R5 Homa. So R5 Homa, R5 is about 17% better than R1, since we are not doing a HP build here, it's only 17% better. Damage goblet is even better at R5. You can see here. Okay. It's even better. So these are based on, okay, the realistic figures are as such at level 9 for the burst M41C as well as the burst initial hit. So I will do a weapon comparison video separately. This video is really just to talk about sense and goblet win stat options, and also some points to note about the different weapons. Okay, thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember the video and click subscribe for more. Bye!